Hello everybody! So this series of videos I'm going to be making is called It Came From the Collection, as you can tell. What this is basically for is I've always wanted to kind of go through my entire collection, but every time I start doing that it just takes a little too long, and then I'll get more movies, and then it's just I end up restarting. So what this is going to be is I'm going to randomly generate a number of one of the movies in my collection, and then I'll just get a little bit more in-depth on that one. So a little bit more fun for me and keeps things fresh. So the first movie that I got from this random number generator is Alice in Wonderland.
To be more specific, this is the Alice in Wonderland from 1933. This is one I kind of just stumbled into, as I'd never heard about it until finding my copy of the DVD.
So this DVD was released around 2010, and it's apparently the first time ever that this movie was released on home video, which is hard to believe that it took that long to come out on home video, not even a VHS release. So that's kind of neat, but a little bit odd in my book.
And here is my copy of the DVD. There's nothing really special about the case, or even the disc for that matter. And looking at the menu here, it's also nothing outrageous to note. I was a little bit bummed out at the lack of special features, though, especially considering the movie was originally 90 minutes long, and this is the 77-minute cut of it.
Now, there is a little bit of confusion here when it comes to people as to why this got cut the way it did. Some people say it was cut down after Universal bought the rights from Paramount, who were the people who originally made it. Others say that this was always released at this length, and it was cut down from its original length by Paramount themselves after they got a bunch of negative reviews saying that the movie just felt too long. So it's really hard to say why, but it still would have been nice to have some kind of deleted scenes of what was cut. Though that being said, I understand as well, when it comes to movies that are this old, it's really up in the air whether or not those scenes even still exist. So, just saying.
But let's get to the movie. So getting right into it, the movie starts off with a picture book, which shows the characters next to the actors playing them, which is, a nice little setup, but is also extremely necessary, because this is an all-star cast, but they've made the bold choice of just completely covering their actors in heavy makeup, so it's near impossible to tell who is who.
Get in. I shall sit here till tomorrow.
For instance, this is the Mock Turtle.
And the different branches of arithmetic. Ambition, distraction, uglification.
Okay, now, would you have guessed that this is none other than Cary Grant? Yeah, I really don't think anybody could without knowing that ahead of time. So after the book intro, the movie just gets right into it. Alice is bored, and she ends up going through the mirror into Wonderland, where she meets up with this really weird clock man that I just can't get enough of.
Bong, 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 8 o'clock.
But your hands say 20 minutes to 4.
I never let my left hand know what my right hand is doing.
From there, the movie follows story beats from both of Lewis Carroll's books, so Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. So we see a lot of the immediate scenes that come to mind when you think of Alice in Wonderland. Things like Alice falling down the rabbit hole, her conversation with the caterpillar, the Mad Tea Party, the Red Queen's castle, and that's kind of where my gripe comes from for this movie. It very much feels like it's just going from scene to scene. This could be due in part to the fact that it was apparently based on a popular play out around the same time. It would explain the whole set-to-set feeling that I'm getting. But just the transitions sometimes are just so sudden that it just throws me right off guard.
However, this also could be considered a positive thing, since it makes the movie feel a little bit off, which kind of adds to the lunacy of the story.
I also think it's worth mentioning that some of the effects in here are just so bizarre. They're borderline creepy, like this lady that we see a few times.
Wow.
Or like Humpty Dumpty.
Why, it's Humpty Dumpty.
This pudding close to the end.
What impertinence.
And the mutton. Oh, the mutton. This simultaneously gets way too much screen time and just not enough screen time. And it's just crazy. It reminds me of something out of the Mighty Boosh.
Here I am.
Anyway, I thought I'd also mention that this was a pre-code picture. So that means that they didn't have to follow as much rules and regulations as what would be enforced later on. So there's a lot of things that are in this that wouldn't have necessarily flown in even just like a year's time.
For instance, these flamingos just being used as real mallets. I mean, I found myself just watching to see if they would ever switch out to like a dummy or just a stand-in prop, but no, they just keep using the flamingos, which sometimes seem like they're just not having any of it being held like that, like they're trying to escape. There's also this scene with a horse that I could swear I can see his teeth chattering sometimes, like when the night falls off of him, like he's kind of scared, and he's just having none of it either. They're not as rough in these aspects as some other films I've seen, but it's still a surprise to me. Last thing I really want to mention is this animated sequence of the poem The Walrus and the Carpenter. It seemed somewhat familiar to me and I couldn't explain it, so I had to look into it. And it was actually made by a studio called Harmon and Ising, or just Harmon Ising, who were responsible for a lot of the early Oswald the Lucky Rabbit shorts. So that suddenly made a lot more sense to me.
So overall, I'd say it's a pretty weird movie, which is a bit of an understatement, but it's still interesting nevertheless. Like, Charlotte Henry does an amazing job as Alice, just nails it. I mean, she radiates this kind of natural, curious innocence. She's got that one foot in reality, but is just open to the craziness that's going on around her. And I think she nailed this role for that aspect. I would say that it does kind of feel long at times, as previously mentioned, which is a shame, because I get the vibe that this could have been like a Wizard of Oz of its time, which is ironic because this bombed so hard that studios didn't really see the marketability in a fantasy movie like this until Wizard of Oz came out. Regardless, I'd still check it out, give it a watch.
Here I